I'm here with a really upbeat message. There are a lot of people who are critical of this country, the creativity, the innovation on both sides of the spectrum, the political spectrum, authors and such. And I'm back from writing a book about this energy revolution, more reassured than ever about the nation's future. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why in a minute. But first I thought I'd do kind of a thumbnail sketch about this revolution and why we call it a revolution, why there's been such a big impact on the country. Some of these bullet points you'll all know, maybe others you won't, but it is a real revolution. We're moving towards energy independence. We produce about 8 million barrels a day of oil today. Up from 5 million just a few years ago. I don't believe actually we're going to achieve independence per se, but I think it's going to be more energy security, which I mean dependence on our friends, Canada and Mexico. But it's a real dramatic change for anybody. I remember, I'm sure many in this room, I remember being in the back seat of my parents' car in 1973 when there was a long line to get gas at the pump because of the Arab boycott, embargo, and obviously things have changed. We're going to be exporting natural gas from the lower states starting next year. Dramatic, remarkable change, and we're actually even talking about exporting crude. And this all just happened in just a few years, and really just it's been shocking to a lot of people, experts and non-experts alike. What else has this done? Well, it's given us jobs, as many as 2 million jobs, when you include the energy industry and other kinds of related industries that rely on cheap natural gas, chemicals and tires and cement and all that kind of stuff. There's a reshoring movement of companies moving back to America to take advantage of these low cost, thanks to natural gas, low natural gas. And, you know, President Obama talks about 100 years of natural gas. He came to this realization quite late, but I'm not quite as that upbeat. But I think we've got generations of natural gas, and it's all thanks to this remarkable innovation, American innovation. So we've got a move towards energy independence. We've got natural gas prices that have collapsed. We pay about a third to a half of what they do in Asia and in Europe. That's why people are reshoring and coming back to America. And it's given us geopolitical flexibility. There are better experts in this room, but I'm of the belief that at the margin, the Middle East is going to mean less to us going forward. It's not to say that we won't care as long as crude's in the Middle East, as long as we have allies there, the Middle East will care. But at the margin, it will matter less. I think it's no surprise that when Saudi Arabia begged America to get involved with Syria, we didn't do anything about it. There are other reasons why we didn't. But I think we're going to care much less about what the Saudis think going forward, and we're going to have a little bit more of a pivot towards Asia. So these are all remarkable changes that have happened from this energy revolution. But the most remarkable thing to me, and the most unexpected to me, is how it happened. And that's what my book is about. If you think about it, who should have led this energy revolution? Well, it should have been the multinationals, right? It should have been BP or Exxon or Chevron. It should have been government leaders. It should have been Wall Street leaders. They all got it wrong. They all bet against America. They all said we were running out of oil and natural gas. And you can't even blame one administration. You can't even blame one government official. Just a few years ago, Greenspan was in Congress pounding the table saying we need to invest billions and billions to build import terminals of natural gas on the coasts, on the Gulf Coast, because we were running out of natural gas. And it wasn't just he. ExxonMobil, their headquarters in Irving, Texas, is literally on top of the Barnett Shale. The Barnett Shale is a formation of rock, which is the epicenter, is ground zero for this whole revolution. And did Exxon care about the Barnett Shale? No, they were drilling anywhere but America. Offshore, Asia, Africa, their own backyard, the literal backyard, they gave up on. Who else? Chevron. Chevron had a group, and I write about it in my book, that was really early in betting on shale, betting on horizontal drilling, which has been at the heart of this revolution. And they started it, and there's a up-and-coming executive running it, and we're talking the 90s. And what happened? Everyone at the company made fun of what they were doing, undercut them, poached talent. They ended up just getting rid of the division and closing it down. So the experts got it wrong. Government officials and others. Wall Street got it wrong, too. In 2007, the largest leverage buyout in history of TXU was made. Who did that? And that was a bet on rising natural gas prices. And because all the experts said, we were running out of natural gas, right? Who did that deal? It was the who's who on Wall Street. KKR, Goldman Sachs, TPG, Warren Buffett bought up the debt. So all the experts were betting against America. All the experts were saying weren't going to get much natural gas or oil anymore, and we were going to have to import it, and natural gas prices and oil prices were going to have to go higher. And they all got it wrong. So who got it right? Well, those are the kind of people I write about in my book, and I think there's some lessons to be learned from those that got it right and from this era. So the first person is a guy named George Mitchell. Not the senator. George Mitchell was a guy from Texas. He's actually the son of an immigrant. There are a lot of immigrants in my book, children of immigrants, older people who get it right late in their life. It's a very American book. It's a book about resilience and persistence. So George Mitchell ran, again, he's a son of an immigrant. His father is a guy who's named Savas Paraskopoulos from Greece. And he came over to America. He had no future in Greece, a poor area in Greece. Came over to America, got off the boat, needed a job. They threw him to go work on the rails, building the tracks from Arkansas to Texas. And then one day, his paymaster came to him looking really angry, really upset. And he's like, Savas, well, what's with this name? I can't spell it. When I write a check, I'm having troubles here. What's with the name? So Savas said, well, what's your name? And he said, my name's Mike Mitchell. And he said, all right, I'll be Mike Mitchell too. And he took his name. And that was, and then his son is George Mitchell. And he started a natural gas company in Texas. And by around 1982, he realized they were running out of natural gas. And they didn't have many options. They didn't have like Exxon and BP and all these multinationals. They didn't have Africa and Asia and offshore. All they had was some acreage in Texas. So he said, guys, let's figure out how to go down a little bit lower to the shale formation. Shale is just kind of a rock, a compressed rock. You can read all about it in the book. And it's just very tough to get much oil and gas. We always knew there was a lot of oil and gas in shale. The problem was we couldn't figure out how to do it in a cost-effective way to go get it. But Mitchell's back was against the wall. He didn't have much of a choice. He was supplying about 10% of the natural gas going to Chicago at the time, and he didn't want to blow it. He didn't want to close down his company. So he said, guys, let's go figure it out. And they spent years on it, and they worked on it from 1982 to 1997. And as recently as 1997, they were still having failure. They, by then, Mitchell had cancer. He was around 80 years of age. His wife had early signs of Alzheimer's, and his stock had tumbled. But they kept working on it and persisting and innovating, and they figured out how to hydraulically fracture rock in shale. They got some lucky breaks along the way, but it's really a story of American persistence, and they figured it out. And by 2002, he sold his company for a few $1 billion, and he proved, and the group of them, and I write about George Mitchell, but I write about the guys in the fields, true Americans who are kind of working hard and innovating, and they didn't really make that much, quite frankly. I write about hedge fund guys usually. So the guys in the fields who were responsible for changing Mitchell Energy and really changing the country, they didn't get paid that much. You read in the book, $150,000 for that, but they changed the world, and they figured it out. And so George Mitchell is the first guy I write about, and the first person we have to thank for this energy revolution in this country. There are others too. There's a guy named Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm was born dirt poor. He was in a little town in Oklahoma, 13th of 13 children. He was so poor that he couldn't even go to school each year growing up until around Christmas time because he had to help his parents in the fields. They were sharecroppers, and they were picking watermelon and cotton, and all the Hamm children had to help their parents, and then finally they could go to school around Christmas time. So Harold Hamm grew up dirt poor, and he had this hunger to find oil. And it's really an American archetype, but it still exists when you travel around the country. And I was really blessed for this book to be able to go places like North Dakota and Oklahoma and Pennsylvania and Louisiana and Texas. And you still see people hungering to find oil and to get really, really rich. I work at the Wall Street Journal, so I'm a free markets guy. So there's something to be said for incentivizing people and helping and allowing them to get really wealthy. And along the way, having a real impact on the world. And it may sound corny, but a lot of these guys along the way kind of said, you know what, we want to change the country. We want to help bring us towards energy independence. So Harold Hamm was one of these guys. He wanted to get wealthy. You know, he had been born with nothing, and he wanted to find a lot of oil. And he started off, he didn't go to college, didn't know anything about geology or drilling or engineering, but he was self-taught, and he had a hunger to find oil. And he listened to what older people in the area and in the industry were working on. And he said, and he started his business, and he was finding some oil in Oklahoma. And then he heard about the Bakken formation. The Bakken is up north. It's started in Montana, but then went over to North Dakota. And he said, guys, let's go up to the Bakken. Let's figure it out. Let's get all this oil there. And it was no surprise that there was a lot of oil in the Bakken. Everyone knew North Dakota had a lot of oil. The problem was it was a boom and bust area. Always were people finding oil, and then always the price would collapse or it ran out. It really didn't work. But Hamm persisted, and his guys persisted. And as recently as 2006, they almost gave up. They tried to sell their acreage. No one wanted it. They had to scale back, but they kept working on it, and they made it happen. And today, the Bakken, we produce about 1 million barrels a day of oil. That's of the 8 million of the whole country. And Harold Hamm is one of the wealthiest men in the world. He's worth about $17 billion. Talk about a rags to riches story, a real American story. He's so wealthy that he's going through a divorce right now, unfortunately. But his wife is going to walk away with more money than Oprah Winfrey. So it's a real American story, and it only could come in America. So what I want to leave with you guys is a couple of themes and a couple of lessons that I learned from this. People say to me, well, Greg, there's a lot of oil and gas in China and shale in China. They have more than we do in England and Poland and Argentina and Mexico, all over the world. Why did this revolution happen here, and when is it going to happen elsewhere? And when I first started the book, I figured the first chapter, as it were, is America, and then we're just going to sort of pass the baton to the rest of the world. And I'm more convinced than ever that it's going to take years before everybody else catches up to us. And that's because we've got some real American attributes that others don't share. And one of them is the fact that we own our mineral rights. We own the rights under our farms and our homes. So when an entrepreneur comes knocking on the door, or his landman comes knocking on the door, you can work out a deal. And that was the key to this whole revolution, that entrepreneurs were out there knocking on doors, leasing up acreage all over the country, and they could only do it in America. Whereas, like, I was in England talking about my book, and there were really good arguments why they should start fracking. North Sea is depleting, etc. But it's hard to argue. It's hard to convince a guy who lives in a pretty area in the countryside that they should bring in fracking into their backyard. Fracking happens to be, set aside all the environmental risks, and I think they're overstated. It's noisy and it's messy and it's dirty, and who wants it in your backyard unless you're going to get good money and you need the money. But if you're not going to get paid for it, like in England, because the crown owns the mineral rights, it's really hard to make the argument. But we own our own mineral rights. It's a beautiful thing about this country. We also have all kinds of things that God gave us: fresh water, more than other countries. Our shale formation's actually not as deep as places like China. We've also got a pipeline system, and we've got capital markets. But most importantly, we've got entrepreneurs who are able to take risk and are okay about making mistakes. You go elsewhere, you go abroad, and I've traveled, you don't have that kind of passion to roll the dice and make mistakes. And it's not okay to make mistakes elsewhere. You could lose more than your job in some countries. But in America, you could still make huge mistakes and take risks. And to me, that's the key to this whole revolution. So I'm very encouraged when I think about the future of this country. There are young people. You got to get out to places like Louisiana, making over $100,000 a year without much of an education, just working really hard. People moving up to the Bakken area, Williston, trying to pay off debt, and they're able to do that by working really hard. So getting out to I always tell people, you got to get away from the coasts to get some real sense for the innovation going on there and creativity in this country. So I will stop here and take a few questions from the audience about anything environmental side or anything else related to this revolution.
It was great, Greg. Thank you so much. Thank you. Super. These Okies are really something else, right, Jim? So, Jim, with that, we give you the first question.
Okies and Texans bond on some of these things.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I'm delighted to see this book. George Mitchell was an amazing man. I didn't know him, but I knew I've been interested in him for some time. And a few years ago, I was doing a due diligence, and I called around, and I got somebody whose name was Mitchell. It sounded like a young voice with a Texas drawl. And I was an oil and gas company, and I said, by any chance, are you related to the George Mitchell? And he kind of laughed and said, yeah, he's my father. And I said, well, as I understand it, if there were a Nobel Prize in stubbornness, he would have it. And his son said, yeah. He said he's a great man. He's a close friend of mine. I've been devoted to him since I was a little boy. But I tell you, not only do I not know anyone as stubborn as my father, I have never heard of anyone as stubborn as my father.
That sums it up.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? John Stossel from Fox News, one of the greats.
That was a great presentation, but as a free marketer from the Wall Street Journal, why do you say the gas lines were caused by the OPEC embargo when it was the price controls imposed by President Nixon?
I'm an expert on what's happened in the last few years. I'm not going to delve into that, John. I'll let you take care of that. You can ask me about anything post that.
Another great journalist, Katie McFarland.
Hi, thank you so much for writing this. This is not only what you're talking about, but the geostrategic implications. It's the biggest game changer since we won World War II. But can you go into a little more detail about why fracking wouldn't work elsewhere? China, Europe, Britain, et cetera.
Yeah, so I've talked to people who've gone back and forth and are trying to help them, especially in China. And if you care about global warming, and I know it's a sensitive topic in this topic, let's assume there may be global warming for a second. You've got to really be a backer and a huge fan of fracking. Because we can't do anything in this country, given the numbers in terms of carbon dioxide and other. And Europe can't really do anything to make any headway into fracking. Into global warming. The only country that can is China. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to get them to stop relying on so much coal and to shift, like we have as a country, to natural gas. So our carbon dioxide emissions have dropped to 1994 levels. And we got teased for not signing Kyoto Agreement, et cetera. Well, we're compliant. And you go to Europe, and it's ridiculous. Now, we are literally selling coal to Newcastle. Literally, England is buying our coal. It's a fascinating thing, and they don't really think about it in those terms, but they should. So I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic a little bit. The reason why, so in other words, China has a huge amount of natural gas and oil in its shale. The problem is there are all kinds of problems. They don't have a pipeline system. We've spent years developing our nation's pipeline system. They don't have anything close to that in China. They don't have the fresh water. It takes a lot of fresh water. It takes about 5 million gallons of water per well. People on the left say, that means we should stop fracking. I say, fine, but then we can't have any more golf courses. We can't have beer. We can't have a lot of waste in the agriculture industry. So there's a much more use and waste of water beyond the energy industry, for sure. And they're doing a much better job of working to do recycling, et cetera. So we've got all kinds of access to that, and we have entrepreneurs. So the Chinese government, the top-down government model hasn't worked long term. It's worked over the last few years, you could argue. I'm not a big fan. I'm not necessarily as bullish on China long term as some other people are. So we've got these entrepreneurs in this country that they don't have there.
A question from over here. If you'd introduce yourself.
Certainly. I'm Sean Hackbarth. I write for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. General Petraeus mentioned this briefly, but can you talk a little bit about the computing power, the IT, and the data that's the innovation in that end that's had to be needed to make this work successfully?
Yeah, it was just part of the process. 3D imaging was key. There's a whole slew of innovations. There's horizontal drilling. Everyone focuses on fracking, which really was the Mitchell guys and not really the government. But the government helped a little bit more on things like horizontal drilling. And horizontal drilling is sort of drilling down and vertically, like we always have historically in this country and elsewhere, then turning the drill bit 90 degrees and going horizontally. And the beauty of that is you can target these long, narrow shale formations. So horizontal drilling is a technology and other kinds of things I write about in the book. So it's all, it's a book about energy, but it's really a book about American innovation and technological innovation.
Mr. Kadish, do you have a question? I didn't mean to ambush you. Here. He's so knowledgeable about this whole area. Here, take the mic. Thank you,
Well, I have 100 questions for you. You answered most of them. I saw you at the Stroke Conference, and it was a disappointment to me because there was only one question. So I met you afterwards, right afterwards, and I said, could you please make yourself available for a conference at Gatestone? And I want to thank you for coming.
Sure.
Steve Forbes listed your book as one of the 10 best nonfiction, and he knows what he's doing. Thank you for your help, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I'll be around so we can talk a little bit later as well. Thank you.